Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Paradigm Shifts podcast with your host, Keisha Kruger. I'm an organization development practitioner and executive coach, working with leaders to create positive changes in the workplace using behavioral science. My personal mission? Share science-based tools and leadership insights from the field that you can use in the workplace and beyond. Considering we spend about 3/4 of our lifetime at work, there is incredible science and organizational psychology that can be used to rethink the way we work, lead, and ultimately live. Join me as I speak with thought leaders and business leaders in practice, unpacking light bulb moments for paradigm shifts. Hello, everyone. On this week's episode, I had the pleasure of chatting with Scott Avey around the topic of breaking down stubborn, siloed cultures within organizations. Not sure what that is? Stay tuned to the episode. We've got plenty of knowledge and expertise being dropped by Scott, who has spent over 20 years as a partner and senior executive of Air Components and Systems Limited, where he helped build and scale the organization with a focus on the customer-facing side of the business. I'm really excited for you to hear this episode. If you want to learn more about Scott, his services, and how to be in contact, be sure to visit the show notes. Hi, Scott. Thank you for joining me.
You're very welcome. So glad to be here.
I am excited because there's been some things on my mind that I'd like to chat with you about related to silos in companies.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, great.
So,
I have some experience there, so glad to help.
yeah. So tell me, from your experience, have you seen silos, cultures in companies, and what does that look like? How are they created?
Well, I think that silos are a natural outflow of the human nature for personal pride, team pride. So once we kind of understood where it generates from, it
Mhm.
really helped us to manage that and to direct it on an ongoing basis going forward. So in my experience with my company, there were four different divisions in the company, typical for an industrial distribution company. There's an equipment sales team, there's a services and installation team, there's a parts team, and then there's an admin team.
Mm.
And human nature, each team thought they were the most critical and important to the success of the company. And that's just normal. But over time, we realized early on that that was detrimental to the overall growth and detrimental to satisfying our customers. So we worked hard to break down those silos, and it really became very effective. And as a result, the entire team, the entire company prospered from that.
Yeah, and this is why I want to tap into your experience and your observations and your working within an organization to break those silos down, because it sounds to me that it's not necessarily that the goals are not in alignment, right? But
Correct.
the mentality is, if we're the most critical, then you can't be the most critical, then you can't be the most critical.
Correct.
So, how does one break that down while still keeping the rows moving in the same direction?
Well, I think the most effective thing is really communication and
Mm.
making sure everyone understands the critical nature of every single component of the company to the overall goal of establishing excellent customer intimacy and setting our company's performance dramatically different than our competitions. So what we did is created that unified vision of what the company's goals really were and what our objectives were, and that was really customer focused. And then through a number of team meetings and town hall meetings, we reinforced all the teams and the critical impact that they had in the success. And then we also reinforced how important it was that they work together and create a fabric of communication and a fabric of knowledge that could rely on one another, so that together we were much stronger than we any team was independently.
Mm. So, all that on the surface sounds really incredible, but in terms of you being in it in the moment,
Mhm.
what were some of the signs that allowed you to recognize that, hey, there's friction between these groups and we need to resolve this? How did that
Yeah,
surface?
yeah. I would say almost in every case, the issue presented itself when there was a problem, when there was a difficulty in a customer, and there was a difference of opinion of what the equipment sales team thought should happen versus the service team, technically, and then how we resolved that was really we had managers and leaders under each different section of the business to make sure there was proper focus, and the two managers came together and discussed the issue with the other people involved, and there was an open dialogue about, okay, the objective here is to solve the problem, is to resolve the issue, whatever that is. And what we did as leaders is we didn't talk about and defend the actions of one of those silos. We just talked about it from a customer perspective and what that made the customer feel like. And
Mm,
therefore it the leaders and the managers didn't take an approach of trying to defend their team. It really uh, took the participants in the view of, okay, well, how does this make the customer feel?
mm,
And as a result, then we demonstrated how we can work together and share information to come to the best solution. So really, it was a cohesive effort, and it was consciously talked about ahead of time that we would support one another, and we would not, the managers of the two teams would not attack each other, that we would work together with a common goal.
mm. Sounds simple. Sounds so simple when you say it out loud, but managers previously not having that paradigm, right? And then
Right.
getting them to then come together and have that new paradigm around where we're a cohesive team, we're working together. We are not going to revert back to old behaviors.
Right.
What was the switching point? Was it, I know you said communication was critical in breaking down silos across the company, but what was the switching point or turning point to get the manager's mindset on board?
Well, we in our company we would hold monthly managers meetings, and we would stress the importance of common communication and teamwork. We would do quarterly team events where we would just get together and get to know each other. And really, what it ended up being was an opportunity to build trust within the organization. So we started at the top, and once the leaders and the managers developed and demonstrated trust in each other, then it began to then filter down through the organization. And unfortunately, this change, or this change in paradigm, doesn't happen overnight.
Mm,
It takes time. But one of the mantras I've always tried to apply in any problem solving is start with the end in mind. What is it that you want the solution to look like? And once you have clarity on what that destination looks like, it's so much easier to plot the path of where do we go from what we are today to where we want to be. And depend on the complexity of the problem, that can take weeks, months, even years sometimes. But at least there's common vision of what that vision looks like. And for us, it was all about the customer experience. What happens when the customer hears one idea and one solution, one tactic from a person versus a completely different one from a service technician? What happens
mm,
to the customer? What happens to the image of our company when they get diverse sets of information that appear to be conflicting? So, and we would use our meetings, our team meetings, and we would highlight an example of what a situation that went well, and we would recognize the individuals that were involved and appreciate them, thank them, and so it built a culture of reinforcement. And then we didn't use in a public forum, we didn't use those examples of when it didn't go well. We preferred to stay more on a positive, reinforce through positive actions and positive stories. And it was amazing how, because of that personal pride, now sudden other everybody wanted to be that story. And
mm.
so that was just a back end reinforcement of when it went well. And it that accelerated the change rapidly. um, and then in each of those team meetings we would give examples and recognize those people, and it just helped a lot.
When you say, I love hearing your success with this because this is not easy to do. I think we have to just say that out loud. This is not
Right,
an
right.
easy feat. A lot of companies struggle with this, and the company that tell us a little bit about the company that you had this experience with, if you don't mind,
Yeah,
actually.
no, sure, love to. This is an industrial equipment company. We sold capital equipment throughout. the Carolinas and Eastern Tennessee for a major manufacturer here in the United States. And there were three owners of the company. Two of us had extensive 15 plus years experience with that manufacturer. So we understood the products and the processes really well. And we took a lot of that knowledge and that experience. Both of us had experience um, from a regional sales perspective, managing other industrial distributors from a manufacturer relationship standpoint. So we got to see 40 to 50 different companies that did the same thing. And what it helped us do is to really identify those activities that were very successful, and we modeled our company after those, and certainly tried to avoid those areas that were problematic. And this whole idea of breaking down the silos was something that we really saw countless numbers of times, really inhibiting growth and inhibiting profitability. And so, right from the very beginning in the late 90s, we just said we are not going to have a company that culture exists. And so we just started and just never tolerated it when we started to see inklings when somebody would badmouth a different team. Um,
Mm. So let's
so
talk a little bit about that if you don't mind. Accountability, right? So
mhm,
you guys, as owners, made a decision very clearly that you were not going to tolerate this behavior. You were going to set the tone for this new culture. And I think that's important to know, right? If the alignment at the top is not in alignment, then it's going to be very difficult for anybody else to get on board. It needs to be everyone at the top in alignment, not
that's
just one or
correct.
two of you. Okay.
Right. Yeah, and then sometimes we had to do the hard thing. Those people that didn't come along in the journey with us, we had to make the decision uh, that cooperative mindset or that cooperative culture was more important than specific individual performance. So when that individual kept downgrading another team, especially in front of a customer, uh, we dealt with that in some ways by having that person find employment in other places, some other
Mhm.
company. And boy, you want to talk about resonating that message quickly. And whenever that would happen, we would always have team meetings immediately after. And a lot of times, because of our 5 branch locations, we had to do that using electronics. But we would, as soon as we let somebody go, we immediately called everybody and got them on a phone and said, "Here's what happened. Here's why." And so that they heard directly from the leaders that the reason for the um, firing,
Mhm.
and not allow that person to subvert our culture by trying to insert his or her own thoughts and opinions of why he or she got fired.
It definitely
So
sends a strong message.
it does, and then ultimately, what it also does is it reinforces trust in the organization. We didn't do this willy nilly. We didn't do this, because of one incident. This is a systemic issue with this individual, and that we couldn't tolerate it because of how it would erode the customer's experience and erode support of each other. So, we communication to build trust is really at the end of the day what we did, and so that helped build that culture and eliminate the people that were not going to come along on the journey with us.
And I think when you said it, going back to the managers and the leaders demonstrating trust before you can move it down, right?
Hmm.
That's a great example of how that trust is being reinforced. Talk to me a little bit about how alignment was created to begin with on this new culture or shared vision with the owners. So I think that process wasn't overnight as well, right?
Right. Well, it's natural to have some um, alignment leadership wise over functional teams, how they do their job, what they do, skills required, and then key performance metrics. I mean, it's natural. Everybody can't be on the same level playing field. There's different skills and different attributes required for different teams. um, and so we that's why we broke the team up into 3 distinct leadership channels: sales and equipment, parts and service, and then administration, because each one requires different leadership and different attributes there of the leaders. Um,
Mhm.
so that's why we broke it up that way, and then we just decided early on that we were not going to have any cross functional area of communication where we didn't agree, we would do that privately outside, and we would reach agreement and then go forward in complete alignment. And what
Mm.
it also did is it really helped us grow because we trusted each other, and our different backgrounds and skill sets were such that it really helped us develop the best possible solution to any issue that we came up with.
And when there were disagreements, perhaps,
Mhm.
how was that handled?
Well, I mean, we just talked through it. We talked about the merits and pros and cons. Sometimes it was that, basic, where we would just list what the reasons why we want to do something, the reasons why we don't, and we were all just on uh, this common path that we
Mhm.
wanted the company to succeed. And so we checked our egos at the door, and we listened well to one another, and then just moved forward. Um,
I love
and
that.
and then the beauty of a what I call smaller company is that if we got 2 or 3 months down the road and something wasn't working, we could immediately change. It wasn't this big corporate hierarchy of decision making. We could make changes pretty rapidly, and that helped us to really fine tune any of these issues as quickly as possible and move forward with it.
Yeah, and is monitoring potential silos from rebuilding kind of a continuous ongoing process, right? As soon as someone pulls back from holding the culture accountable, holding people accountable to the new culture, then that has potential to slide back, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's why we set up these monthly meetings, and
Mm,
always part of that monthly meeting is what's working well, where can we improve? And as leaders, we listened well to the people, and tried to take their input as honest input about what was going well, and what needed improvement. And any corporation, any company, there's a journey that happens, and there has to be continuous mindset of continuous improvement, because without that, then there's really no growth.
mm. And what happens if you have people that aren't on that page, right? And they don't necessarily consider maybe they're not as open to change or continuous improvement. They kind of feel
Right.
fatigued by that. How do you get
Mhm.
someone like that on board?
Well, and that's happened. We implemented a software system to integrate the whole entire company, and there were some people that were just not technology savvy, and they
Mhm.
really slowed us down. And that's another level of performance engagement. Is it slowing the growth of the company down to the point where we need to outsource that person and move them outside, move them to another company, or can we train them? Can we do something more? So it's really one of those things that as the company continued to grow and improve, some it outpaced some people's capabilities, and we just had to be honest about what that long term vision was of continuous growth, and really differentiation from the competitors, and and then make those tough decisions. Even though somebody may have been with the company 20, 25 years and had a good track record, today is a different day than it was 20 years ago, and so we had to be honest with them after significant effort and work that this just wasn't going to work, and we needed to help find them work somewhere else.
Yeah, whether the conversation is about termination or correction,
Hmm.
course correction, what I hear out of this is that it requires, regardless, an ability to have a difficult conversation.
Right. Very true.
And not everyone's comfortable with having difficult conversations. Would you agree?
I agree. Very much so. Um, the the challenge is if you aren't willing to do that, you
Mm.
lose the ability to reach that vision, and and others
Mm.
will those individuals will pollute the organization. And what happens typically is that the best performers, the best people, those are the ones that will leave. You're not going to lose the lower performing people. They're going to hang around. And so are you willing to allow a lower performing individual to sacrifice the success of the higher performing people? Because they'll jump ship quickly, and they lose confidence in the organization. And
Mm.
so that, we saw that happen a couple times, and it was like, well, we're not doing that again, and so that's where that internal courage comes from, is that who do you really want to lose? Do you want to lose your best people, or the people that are holding you back?
Yeah.
Because those are reality checks. You can't just assume it's not going to happen. because good people will find other places to work.
Yeah, and it goes back to the question when when you're talking about starting with the end in mind, what kind of company do we want to build, right?
Correct.
If we want to build a company with B, C players, for lack of a better expression, then that's a different angle. We're having a different conversation. But if we want,
Correct.
our best talent to serve our clients, to serve our customers, then we need to be the discomfort of having difficult conversations far outweighs actually having them. Like we have to have them.
The other thing that helped us develop this even better was developing, KPIs, key performance indicators, and in each team there were indicators that were financially or numbers driven, and then there were equal number of qualitative, how they do their job, not what they do, but how they perform their job, and
Mm.
those and we would measure those on a monthly basis, and some of those were subjective, but what it allowed us to do is to actually give every employee a uh, something to measure themselves with. How am I doing? And then we would publish a ranking system for the team who's doing the absolute best in each category, and then overall, what that aggregate looks like on a monthly basis. So what that did is that gave us the data that said, this individual is consistently at the bottom of every category and every month's KPI numbers, which gave them the feeling of, oh man, I don't want to be on the bottom. And so hopefully they would change their behavior, and then begin to climb up on the list, and that helped really identify what are those key metrics that helped with the success of that individual's job.
And
And
they were transparent and visible for everyone. So
that's
we
correct.
all know what we're working towards. There's no hidden agenda. There's no just invisibility to the goals here. We know it.
That's right, exactly. And that's why we really liked having things that were measurable: number of
Mhm.
quotes generated this month, number of service calls completed, those things that are typically listed in a KPI. But then those other things that are not typically listed is, you know, uh, response time to calls from salesmen, number of salesman calls that a service technician made to a salesman about an account, and we could track that because of our CRM system that was built into our software. We could monitor how many times serviceman A sent a message to salesman B about an account, and
Mhm.
so those are the kind of behaviors that we wanted to encourage, and so find a way to measure it so that you can then say, okay, we're trending up or we flatlined, and what do we have to do to get to that next plateau? So
Mm.
we had data to be able to show them, and then we would do that on a monthly basis, and then during those team meetings, we would also show the results from the other teams, which would then indicate, good transparency, building trust. What we say is what we measure, and that's what we do. So just all that alignment that really helped bring a common message. The other thing that we started to see, I'm guessing about 5 to 6 years into the mission, is we began to see the top people in our competitors approaching us to work for us, because they heard that we were a great place to work, and therefore we got the opportunity to hire additional salespeople, additional service technicians, additional admin people, because of the
Wow.
quality, the culture, and so that was another reinforcement that the things that we were doing was really helping, and our employees were telling other people about what it was like to work at our company.
Scott, you hit on something really major here because what from my experience working with different companies and different leaders, I hear all the time, and maybe it's not completely objectively stated, but it's a fear-based mindset around if I hold these people accountable, if I have these difficult conversations, then I'm going to lose this person. I'm going to lose these people, and then we won't be able to find talent to back them up.
Mhm.
But what I'm hearing you say is actually if we have the difficult conversations, we hold people accountable, we are aligned on our vision, then we actually have the opportunity to attract better talent, and we weed out the ones that aren't necessarily for us. And so we're holding ourselves to a high standard, therefore attracting talent who is of that same caliber, I guess, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
It, I guess just think about from our own personal perspective. We like to
Mhm.
work in an organization where we understand what's expected of us and that we're a challenge to achieve another higher level continuously. We want to grow. We want to improve, but we also want a roadmap. We want an idea of how to do that, and then
Mhm.
encouragement and reinforcement to do that. So that is the culture that we develop. The other thing that we did is that we made sure that the leaders in the company were always out in the field with their teams. Um, and from a leadership perspective, we measured that because you don't know how the team is performing until you see them in their real world experience. When you see them in front of a customer, and then that's when that one-on-one coaching can happen, and then it all ties back into that performance metric and how the vision of the company is performing. So that it became um, a really solid way to ensure that we were progressing and that we weren't just listening to somebody's dialogue back in the shop. We actually saw it and how it worked. We went into a service technician's van and said, this thing's a mess. And so we worked with them, but it was face to face, one on one, and then reinforced on a monthly basis from a team perspective.
Yeah, so your actions are backing your words, super
Mhm.
critical in building trust. When it comes to asking the managers and leaders to go out, to support their teams, to observe their teams, did you ever get pushback that it's like too much, especially like one-on-one coaching, it takes up too much of their time? Or did you set the standard from the beginning that that was a requirement of their job?
Well, it was a requirement. We just said that's what's going to happen. And then from an actual uh, experience standpoint, we always tried to make it that we were adding value to their day. We were helping them in a service situation resolve things. We would carry parts from the van to the job site. I mean, it was an active leadership role or active manager role. It would be, helping with a negotiation of an equipment sale or change up the equipment installation a little bit to make it easier to install and better for the customer. I mean, we would bring value to every day that we spent with them. And then there's the personal ride time that you just get to know people better, and you become vulnerable. You share things, what's going on personally, and that's how the company became more like a family. And from a leader and owner perspective, we always felt like our decisions that we were making as leaders and owners was affecting the lives of 55 families, not just 55
Mm.
individuals. And it gave us, it was a weightiness that was there, that we wanted to make the right decision because it was going to affect 55 families, and we wanted the families to succeed. So that was just another way to really put some weight on the importance of us making good choices and doing the best thing we could for our employees.
And that message delivered from the top is what
Hmm.
I'm hearing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
That's incredible.
And we would hold every year. We'd hold two company events. Families always invited. We always tried to do something that was fun and different, and that way, um, you know, children, wives, spouses could all interact, and they all got to know everybody, and it created a good solid environment. Because our
Mhm.
experience was spouses can play a major role in loyalty of an employee when they feel connected to the company and they feel like their spouse is being appreciated and being trusted. It's amazing how they can reinforce staying loyal through some bumpy times.
Mhm. Curious though, going back to the breaking down of the silos, when you started to build in transparency around teams and the KPIs,
Mhm.
did that not how did you keep individuals from then feeling like a competitive nature in the wrong way? I guess you would say, like, this team's at the bottom versus, because it sounds counterintuitive, right? We've got different silos of different functions saying we're the most critical, and then we're kind of putting a ranking up, and we're saying, all right, this team is at the bottom. How did you get out of that way, of that obstacle?
Well, we never put teams against teams in any of our
Uh,
analysis. We always kept it within measuring the team and what their contributions were to that team.
hmm.
So, and then when we would hold our monthly meetings, we would talk about the performance of all those teams or silos, and so that they were aware of what admin was doing and where their challenges were, and maybe some of the ideas or things that other teams were doing that would compromise that. So one of those activities was credit and collection. So how effectively are the sales and service teams talking to their customers to set them up so that there would not be a collection issue? Or, so what are those things that those other teams can do to help admin? What are those things that the other teams can do to help parts or service or equipment?
Hmm.
And so
That
those
makes
were
a lot
the
of sense.
so we weren't competing with one another, and we were really just trying to make sure that what we didn't make it harder for another team. And we tried to make it so that it was more seamless and easier for them.
And shining light on the contributions of each team, because now it's not, oh, our team's the only one that can bring value. It's, oh, look at all this other value that other teams are bringing. Who's responsible for measuring all of these things, and who keeps track of it?
Well, the individual team leaders would keep track of their own team, and then we would have our monthly managers meeting where we would bring all those together and share those with each other. And so, it was one of those that was mostly done through the leadership team meetings.
Love that. And then were managers encouraged to continue sharing that downwards to their employees about the success and
Absolutely.
contributions? Okay.
Absolutely. And from an overall company perspective, we would hold quarterly, what we called um, not neighborhood, but citywide meetings where we would have the whole entire company on calls at the same time. And that's when we
Mhm.
would share the overall performance of the company, and we would highlight a specific, customer success story. And we would always try to pick one from admin this month, or we would bounce around so that there was always something talked about from every team during one of these citywide meetings.
It's incredible. So communication is key. We have to
Mhm.
consistently communicate at all levels. So quite
Correct.
a lot of work that's done with this. But that means the individuals at the top need to be bought into that shared vision.
Well, it was interesting because when you think about the journey, there's a lot of effort at the beginning, but when you start with that
Mhm.
vision in mind, that destination, when you start with the destination in mind, it creates a much easier communication path. And then ultimately, we wanted to have a company that was uh, performing at excellent levels, and to be able to do that, we had to put that work in the beginning. And then once that culture journey got started, once that train got down the track, it just started pulling itself, and you got good ideas and contribution from all employees, and it kept building and building, and it got to the point where there was a lot of effort put into the KPIs and making sure they were accurate. They weren't
Mm.
static. We would, when everybody was really doing well on one idea, we would replace it by something that we needed improvement in another area,
Mm.
so that we constantly kept that train moving forward, and the momentum was just amazing how that helped.
Now,
So
when
a
you
lot of
had
work, a
when
lot of work
you
at the beginning, but then it's less work when it gets to go when it's down the track ways.
and the benefits are just so extremely far outweighing any of the effort that would need to go into it. I mean, even just attracting the talent that, I
Right.
imagine that as you're hiring new talent, you're bringing individuals who are kind of already in alignment with that new culture.
Well, that
You're
was
not
yeah.
having to train that.
Right, and that was all became part of our interview processes. Here's how we measure things, and here's our culture here. Do you feel like you're gonna, or give us examples how you feel like you can contribute to this culture? And of course, they already knew what the image in the marketplace was, so it became part of the interview process. And then during the onboarding process, it also really broke each one of those KPIs down and how we measure it, why we measure it, how important it is. And then each employee, every employee that came with the company would spend time in each of those different departments. So depending
Mm,
on what they were going to do, how long they spent in service or parts or would depend, but everybody during their initial 3 months of employment would spend typically a week in every department. So somebody new to admin would spend a week traveling with a service technician or various service technicians for a week. Same thing, sales would travel with service, and so what that did is that right from the initial onboarding process, it created a level playing field, and it created this knowledge of, wow, a service technician's job is really hard. I respect what they do, and
yeah.
it may not be what I want to do, but you respect the individuals and their contribution to the company.
Talk about empathy building. That's
Correct.
incredible.
Correct.
Did you do that at all levels with all employees
Yep,
or specific
absolutely.
groups?
Nope,
Wow.
all employees.
That investment up front, isn't that quite significant? The time?
It is, but, when you're looking at a 10 to 15-year horizon for somebody's employment, to get them started off right is just a
Mm.
is an invaluable experience, an invaluable, investment in our opinion, and it proved out to be very successful.
Real quick, I want to go back to the KPIs. You had mentioned that you do replace them every once in a while, right? Not that these
Mhm.
are moving targets, but that when you've kind of accomplished an area, you feel good about where it's at, you then bring light to a new KPI. How often would you replace them, and what did the communication around that look like?
Well, typically that would only be done on an annual basis,
Mm,
and it would be because of some need to focus on a certain area.
mhm,
It was more a need of driven out of a need for change rather than we feel really good about this one, because all of them are so important that. But if I can't recall the specific issue now, but we would do that typically only on an annual basis. That way, everybody didn't feel like we were constantly changing the game.
mhm.
At the beginning of every year, we would typically in the first week of the year, which was very slow for us, um, uh, from a customer visit standpoint, we would have team meetings where we would talk about the performance of the team and the company from the past year, and then each person was given an opportunity to talk about what they were going to do different for this coming year, and that's when we would launch the new KPIs. And we would talk about the new KPI and why that was important, and then listen to the team about the effectiveness of measuring that and how we're going to measure it. Do we
Mm.
feel like it's valuable to measure this? And we would get alignment right from that initial meeting, and then we could move through the rest of the year measuring that and not get pushback.
So annually, and that made them confident in aligning because we knew that's the target that we're gonna be focused on this year. And how many KPIs are too many, if that's possible?
We limited it to 10, and
Okay.
so we did 5 that were quantitative and then 5 that were qualitative, but still measurable, but not the typical financial driven KPIs.
Mhm. So not
So,
like yeah, not so many about sales or yeah, I get that.
yeah,
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 response time, and would it be different for each department?
yep, right,
Okay, so each
yep,
division or function would have their own set of 10 KPIs.
that's correct. And we got
Okay.
alignment from a leadership team of what those were going to be, because there was input from service on how sales could be better at helping them, and
Hmm.
likewise with admin. So we that's what the leadership team would do, is develop that in the month of December. Is, do we need to change any KPIs? What should those be? What areas are we struggling in admin? How can we help you, uh, improve your accounts payable or accounts receivable, or whatever. How can we help you do your job better? And so, and what KPI can service do, or can we measure in sales that can help that? So that team building right from the start. Another example of demonstrating teamwork from the top and breaking down silos is in our 5 branch locations, one of the leaders, partners of the company, lived in one city, and the other leader lived in another city, about 4 hours apart. And what we were finding is that those leaders were crossing each other on the interstate often,
Mm.
going to solve customer problems. And so we said, well, how about, both leaders take responsibility for sales and service in half of the company, and not strategically, but from a issue resolution standpoint, and sales and service support. And so we demonstrated that some days the sales leader could be sitting in a service issue with a customer and resolve that. And conversely, the service leader could be sitting in with a sales presentation to help the salesman. And so right from the top, we just worked across typical silos or across divisions, and worked together and developed a visual of what it looks like to be cross functional.
Again, I applaud you for building out empathy in such a way that at all levels, I can understand where you're coming from. If you're asking for this support, I know that it's coming from a place where I've experienced it before versus, oh, you're just giving me another thing to do, or it's another task you're adding to my plate. Or I
Right.
feel like when you're working with different functions like that, you can experience individuals in that narrative, right? It's like, oh, that's another thing you want me to do, or I'm trying to add value to you, but the other person maybe doesn't interpret it as value. But if I've experienced your function, then we have a little bit more of an understanding of where each others are coming from.
And we did it in a way, and some of this is style, but we did it in a way that we were doing it in an effort to help them be better at what they do.
Mhm.
And when they feel that in their gut, then they're going
Mhm.
to be much more open about asking for help when they need it. But it was just in a way that we weren't doing it to be to be um, um, corrective. We were doing it to
Mhm.
help them do their job better. So, some people are better at communicating in that way than others. You know,
Mhm.
but um, it's just one of those things that was part of our leadership culture, is that we were trying to help them be successful, and as a result, succeed in the company.
And you had constant training, I'm imagining, with your leaders
Mhm.
and your managers?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we did training, and also the other thing is we did benchmarking. For a number of years, we benchmarked ourselves against other distributors that did exactly the same thing we did for the same company. And then we realized that we were still only getting a certain perspective, and we weren't really exposing ourselves enough to creative thinking beyond our normal box. So that's when we went out and joined an organization where the leaders of diverse companies can come together and learn from each other and how they solve their issues. And most of the issues are all people related, but
Mhm.
it's nice to hear how companies outside the industry doing something completely different, software, not sales and service, but software or whatever, and how they solve problems. And it really helped us to get to that next level.
And then now, I mean, this is more of an expansive, we're past the silos approach to building and evolving as an organization. Is if you still have those silos, you can't even get to the point where you're thinking outside of the organization, thinking outside of our box,
Correct.
being able to go and find ideas to make the organization even better, because there's still that contention internally, right? Time has flown, Scott. I'm so happy with this conversation. I have still, I probably could have more questions, but do you
Sure.
have anything additional that you'd like to share about driving change in organizations, or any other knowledge you'd like to drop?
No, I think the whole start with the end in mind is a
Huge.
great mindset, and it really helps even organizations that are made up of people with diverse interests or diverse experience bases or ideas. If you can get them to all coalesce of what do we want it to look like when it's right, that makes that process so much easier. Um,
Mm,
and because there's not a lot of difference, in my experience anyway, what utopia looks like. And so once you decide what that looks like, then we can plot the path and the activities to get there. But um, that to me, that's when it starts with that, the process gets much, much easier.
And it's key that it's done at the top first. That
Mhm.
is absolutely key. One final question I have for you, and I ask all my guests, is what is your most recent paradigm shift that you've experienced? It could be related to this topic or just personal or anything.
Well, the biggest paradigm shift for me was that we sold this business in June of 2020, right during the middle of the pandemic, and so for me, going from a very active activity of leading this company to now turning that baby that we've just grown into this very functional adult, productive adult, turning it over to somebody else, that's a hard process.
Mm,
But it's been fun to watch, and I've stayed in contact with many of the people from that company, and they're flying high with the new company. They're doing very, very well. To date, I think only two people out of 55 have decided to go to some other company. Everybody else has stayed, and they are doing exceptionally well. I'm so proud of them, and I'd like to
wow.
think that hopefully some of that is due to our coaching and our experience that we gave them, and the time that they spent with us. So a big paradigm shift for me, but it's been a good one.
Thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and your contributions to this organization. You should be so proud of all of your accomplishments and being able to transition out of it that it's able to thrive and flourish on its own. That's I think even parents want that for their children. So as
Absolutely.
you utilize that analogy around the organization being like your baby, right? So it's like
Right.
now it's flourishing. What's one thing that's helped you in this transition to learn to let go a little bit?
Well, I just think that it one thing. Interesting
Hmm.
question. um, it just takes time. I didn't try to rush through the
Mm.
change. I just allowed it to happen, and now, transitioning to try to help other people is a big game changer for me. Not sitting back on my experiences, but I just know that there's a lot of companies that need the experience, need the ideas that we learned from, and if I can help share that and create a change culture in some other organizations, that's a big deal. And that's what I'm turning my focus to at this point.
I love that. Well, thank you for all of your insight. And I can't wait to put this episode out and for everyone to comment and leave their feedback.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to help.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to leave a review, rate, and subscribe wherever you're listening. If you know a business leader in practice or friend who you think would be interested in this episode, please consider sharing it with them. I am so grateful for your support. For more updates, you can follow us at Paradigm Shifts Podcast on Instagram. See you on the next episode.